phone. And so I was like, I don't have 5 hours. And so they said, you can make an appointment. Well, we were just there for vacation. I was going to make an appointment. So this goes on for, I don't know, probably 2 months. I was doing this like, and I was so frustrated with my phone because it wouldn't charge. And then eventually we were in Pasadena at a birthday party, and I dropped the kids off at a birthday party, and I thought, you know what, there's an Apple store in Pasadena, isn't there? Like in Old Town Pasadena. I thought, I'll just go, and maybe there won't be a line, and I can like find somebody to try to fix my charging problem. And so I went there, and I went in, and there's this young girl, that they have the blue T-shirts on, right? And one of those girls there checking people in, and there's this huge long line, right? And so I'm like, oh, great. And so I get up there, and I said, I need to see somebody at one of I think they call it the Genius Bar. Um, I need to see somebody at the Genius Bar. And she said, well, right now we have about a 6-hour wait. And I'm like, oh, gosh. I'm like, I only have about an hour. And she said, well, what's happened? What's the problem? I said, my phone won't charge. I said, I've been on the phone, I've been on the forums, I've talked to people, I've spent months now trying to figure out how to charge my phone. And she reaches into her pocket. Oh, she goes, oh, that's easy. And she reaches into her pocket and pulls out a paper clip, and she digs it into the little port there, and she pulls out about a teaspoon of pocket lint. And then she hands me my phone, and she goes, there, it's fixed. And I was like, are you kidding me? It took her like 4 seconds to fix it. And she goes, I go, seriously, you just fixed it? She goes, yeah. She goes, why don't you go over and plug it in one of the things, see if it charges. I plug it in, charges right away. I'm like, are you kidding? I've been walking around for months, frustrated and annoyed and tired, and like, what am I going to do? And it was just pocket lint inside that had somehow gotten down into that little charging, what do they call that, a charging port, and it was preventing this connection from happening. And as I thought about that, and I thought about, what I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about today, is sometimes we have trouble connecting with today's youth, don't we? And maybe there's some pocket lint that we need to pull out. Maybe there's some stuff or some ways of thinking or some ways of doing things that maybe we need to rethink with this generation, and perhaps that will enable us to connect with them on a deeper level. And so what I'm going to be talking about simply is teaching to transform teens. And I've got a few slides. I know you might not be able to see it. You can see that one in a digital age, because like Luminita said, it's one thing just to give students a bunch of information and expect it to somehow transform their lives, but that just doesn't work with today's youth. We know that information is not enough, and I'm a strong proponent of information. I love information. I love to study. I love to read. I love to go to seminars. I love to just download talks and podcasts and listen and read and absorb information. And so I'm not saying that we are going to abandon that. I think we need to get creative, and we need to rethink how we disseminate information. Otherwise, as studies are showing, we will fail our children, and they will leave the church. And that's what the current research is showing at an alarming rate. And so I want to talk about that a little bit this morning with you. And at any point, feel free to stop me, ask questions, disagree with me if you want, say that's not true, whatever. And we can dialogue about that and help each other along. We're living in this unprecedented age. We really are. And let's see if this works. We call it the information age, right? And a whole lot like the Industrial Revolution changed and transformed our country and really the world hundreds of years ago. We're living in another one of those. You can kind of sense it, can't you? You can just kind of sense that we're living in another type of, not an industrial revolution, but an informational revolution, where the way and it's changing everything about us. It's changing our economics. It's changing our relationships, the way we parent. It's changing the way we teach. I now teach at a school where all of my students have an iPad. And it's creating some amazing opportunities and some amazing challenges. And I feel like we're right on the cusp of that. It's almost like we have this technology, and we have these opportunities, but in some sense we don't know exactly if we want what, it's like when you get what you want, will you want what you get kind of thing. And so we're struggling with that a little bit to try to figure out how do we use this. Um, you and I speak about all of us, we churn through a tremendous amount of information on a daily basis. Here's some statistics just when it comes to information and what we absorb. So some recent information age stats. The typical American receives about 34 gigabytes of information per day, which is quite a lot. Mostly that's coming, and let me go through a few more of these. But words equate to less than 0.1% of that total. And so where do you think the other information is coming from? It's coming from where? It's images, yes. It's image-based. It's coming through Netflix binge watching. It's coming through all of those other movies, of course, TV, internet, all of that. And so we're in an information age, but it doesn't necessarily mean reading, does it? It means we're getting our information from other sources. And I don't know, maybe I have a few. It says 100 years ago, people were lucky to read 50 books in their lifetime, 100 years ago. And today, we have students I know at my school that will read 50 books probably in a semester, or over the course of the whole year will read 50 books. My daughter, who's 10 years old, I know she's read at least 50 books this year. And to think that for 100 years ago, that's all that some people would get in their lifetime. A few other stats. We now receive 5 times as much information as we did in 1986. And I know, were any of you born after 1986? What year? 98. My goodness. I said, I'm actually speaking to the people that I'm talking about as well, which is kind of, but yeah, to think I was born before 86, but that we receive now 5 times as much information each day as we did in 1986. Each day, the average person produces about 6 newspapers worth of information compared to 1986 with about 2.5. And then we have the equivalent of about 600,000 books stored in our computers, flash drives, etc., that we had. Just information overload. And you probably, I don't know about you, but I have this this continual tension with there's more information out there than I can possibly access in a single, I feel like in a single day or week or month. And you ever feel like you're behind? Like you cannot click on another article and read about that because if you spend too much time on that, culture is moving ahead at a very fast pace, and there's just more and more information and more experts and more things to click on. And so information is certainly not, we are not starving for lack of information. That's my point. We have information overload, if anything. My much bigger concern is where our teenagers are getting their information. And that's probably a bigger issue, is their information is out there, but where, well, let me just ask you, where are your teenagers at, what's the name of the church, I'm sorry? Arabic Community Christian Center, although I came to Glendale Presbyterian Church, which is not the same thing, I'm assuming. Where are your teenagers here getting their information from? Some from school, sure. Their friends. Social media, internet, all different types of places. So they're accessing information. And so maybe it would be helpful before we get into well, how do we teach with all this information? How do we teach to actually transform their lives? Maybe it would be helpful just to begin to try to understand how they think and a little bit about some of the research as to how this group understands information. And, a few years ago, Time Magazine ran, I think this was in 2013, this was the cover of Time Magazine. It said, I don't know if you can read the fine print there, it says the me generation, and a picture of a young girl who is, looks like apparently taking a selfie of herself. And then underneath it says, millennials are lazy, entitled narcissists who live with their parents. And then it says, and why they'll save us, which is an interesting cover story. And this word, they kind of introduced this word millennial. And is that a word we're familiar with? Millennials, sometimes they're known in the research as mosaics. millennials. I think it's anybody born. Some of you are millennials, right? Because it's anybody born, I believe, in like later than 92, around there, is considered in this group. And Time Magazine describes them as lazy, entitled narcissists who live with their parents. And then they add, while they'll save us all, which I can appreciate. I appreciate that last line because I certainly have a tremendous amount of hope for millennials. And I know they've taken a bad rap, maybe in Time Magazine or in some other publications of late, but I have tremendous hope. This is a generation of youth, at least the ones that I am raising and the ones that I teach. This is a generation of youth absorbed with a few things, and here are a few of them. Of course, this selfie, we'll talk about that in a minute. YouTubers. I think the guy in the middle there, anybody know the guy in the middle? Is that PewDiePie? Yeah. PewDiePie, he is the #1 YouTuber in the world. His material, if you listen to it, or if you watch PewDiePie, which I do not subscribe to PewDiePie, but I have gone on because all of my students do, and I just wanted to know, what are they watching? It's pretty profane material that he's putting out there. I believe he has as many followers, he almost would have won our election. If every one of his followers was a vote, he would have come very close to winning our election in November. That's how many followers he is at. About, at last count somewhere, it changes all the time, right? 54, 55 million followers. And many of my students identify with these YouTubers. And they're more apt to be able to identify a YouTuber than like someone like Billy Graham. And maybe I use a name there and you're like, who's Billy Graham? They say that this generation, they don't know kind of some of the foundational Christian, people of our time, names like maybe like Billy Graham, but they do know PewDiePie, and that's kind of, and then of course Snapchat, and the like of Instagram and all of that. They are passionate about these things. Like I said before, they call people like me old who use Facebook. So anybody on Facebook, they tell me I'm old. One of their greatest fears, they call it FOMO. You know what that stands for? FOMO, FOMO, fear of missing out. It's a huge fear amongst our teenagers today, is this idea that people are Snapchatting things or people are posting things on Instagram and they're missing out because they're not at the party, they're not there, and they see it on now. See, I don't know, if in my generation, if you didn't get invited, you didn't get invited, you didn't know what's going on. And you're like, oh, there was something going on over the weekend and I wasn't invited. You found out on Monday, right? Well, today you find out when? In real time. Yeah, and you're finding out in real time about what's going on in your friend network and the fact that you were left out. And so psychologists actually they have a word for it now. It's FOMO, the fear of missing out. A few more statistics just to understand this generation. And I was going to say, Apple changed the world with iPhone 4. Anybody guess why? What changed the world about iPhone? iPhone 4 revolutionized the world. It did what? It was the first front-facing camera, right? iPhone 4 was the first front-facing camera, which now enabled us to take, like those three girls there, to take pictures of ourselves. And I'll give you some statistics about that in a minute. There's a group called Common Sense Media who does a lot of research, and they put out for CNN some statistics about what how much time the average teen today is spending with digital media. They found it's somewhere around 9 hours. That teenagers today are spending somewhere around 9 hours a day. And I thought that was like, no way. That is not even possible. You could spend 9 hours a day with digital media. But they say when you add up, think of all the different ways they spend time. So I have students, some of my boys, my 6th and 7th grade boys, I asked them, they admitted to 3 to 4 hours of video games a night. They said that on average they'll be up to 10 or 11 o'clock after homework playing video games for about 3 to 4 hours a night. Well, that's included in that. And then you take all the time they spend texting and on the internet and on Netflix and absorbing digital media. And 9 hours a day, I guess it's not too far off. They say about half of that will be on their phones. Baylor University did a study and found that the average and their female population at Baylor University was actually 10 hours a day. I read a stat last week that millennials, talking about the selfie, that they estimate that your generation, some of you, the millennial generation will take somewhere around 25,700 selfies in your lifetime at the current rate. That at the current rate, you will take about 25,000 pictures of yourself and perhaps your friends in your lifetime. Because the average, they said, 16 to 25-year-old spends about 16 minutes a day taking selfies. So that would be our high school and college students are spending about 16 minutes a day. And some of that time is just setting up the picture, isn't it? And trying to get and then deleting the ones you don't like and whatever and going back. And so they say about 16 minutes a day taking selfies. 75% of 18 to 24-year-olds report that they reach for their cell phones immediately upon waking up in the morning. And I thought, 18 to 24-year-olds, I do that too. Anybody else? It's like the first thing I check when my alarm it is my alarm. So my alarm goes off, and it's the first thing I check is my email to see what important things I missed overnight while I was sleeping, and who needs to get a hold of me, and who I need to respond to, and who won the game, right? If I can't stay up to see the Clippers game, I check the score. It's like the first thing that I do, and 75%, I guess I'm included in there. And then they say out of bed, teenagers will then check their phones on an average of 221 times a day. And I don't know, how we compute that, but the average, we're checking our devices about 221 times a day. And then this is a great stat. They say 53% of millennials in one survey suggest they would rather give up their sense of smell than their technology. So if you gave them a choice, you can give up your phone or your sense of smell. 53% said I'd rather not smell for the rest of my life, which then would affect taste, correct? Than actually give up their technology. So this is a generation that's passionate about this. And if you want to mess with them, mess with their technology, right? We were on a camp this week, and we disallowed technology with our 7th graders. And you would have some of them were like getting twitchy, right? They were like, we took it for 4 days. We took away they said no video games, no cell phones. We were at a camp. And it was interesting to watch how much they struggled not being away from digital media and being away from technology. So, and then here's the scary thing, is the research is also showing that this same group that I've described, this millennial mosaic group, whatever you want to call them, the current research is showing that they're leaving the church in record numbers. That this group is abandoning faith and abandoning the institutional church. I don't know if you're seeing that at your particular church or struggling with that, with young people just saying, I don't connect with this anymore. This isn't for me. I'm not getting with this, and so they're just leaving. If you're familiar with the Barna Group, I don't know if that name rings a bell. The Barna Group is led by a man named David Kinnaman. They do empirical data research, and what they have found that those raised with Christian background, so that means those raised in the church, that 59% of this generation is dropping out of the church at some point in they will at some point in their lifetime. So we're almost at 60% of our teens who have been raised in the church will eventually leave the church, which is kind of an alarming statistic. So that suggests that for 59% of our teenagers, there's been no transformation and nothing has really taken root in them. I had the opportunity a few years ago to go hear David Kinnaman, who's the president of the Barna Group, and he had a new book out of their research. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this book. I'd highly recommend it. It's called You Lost Me, and it's Barna. It's that group. It's their research. It's a lot of what I'm talking about today. It's about 3 or 4 years old now, but the subtitle was Why Young Christians Are Leaving the Church and Rethinking Faith. And they have some just astounding research on why are millennials specifically, why is this generation leaving the church, and why are they abandoning their faith. I'm going to give you just the briefest of summaries of some of the research, because I think it's very helpful when we talk about teaching to transform, to understand, well, why are they leaving? Or why are they not connecting? Or why are, they have all this information, they have all this access, but why are they still not listening, and why are they abandoning their faith? Here's a quote from the book. On page 39, Kinnaman writes this: "The next generation, that'd be the millennials, is living in a new technological, social, and spiritual reality This can be summed up in 3 words: access, alienation, and authority. And so I want to talk about those 3 words real briefly: access, which we've already kind of talked a lot about in some ways today, alienation, and authority. And so let's talk about these. We'll start with access. And like I said, and we've spent some time already talking about this, that new technology in the digital age has given us unprecedented access to information, analysis, opinions, relationships, and worldviews. Access is not the issue. We have access overload. Luminita actually used a phrase that they use in this book when she said that today's youth are digital natives, that they have grown up with a screen in their hands, right? They don't know any other way, and so they've just this is how they see the world, is through a screen. This is how they perceive, this is how they interpret reality, is through the screen. They've been empowered to think as participants, not just consumers of media. And let me stop there for a minute, because I think that's an important thought that Barna Group talks about, that millennials have been empowered to become participants, not just producers of media. What do you think that means? Or what are they saying there? That today's youth, they participate in media, they don't just consume it. So think 25 years ago, when it came to media, you were simply a consumer. Why? Your voice could not be heard. If you wanted to say something to the world, you had to do what? You had to get on the news. You had to do something to get on Channel 7, right? Or CNN. Or you had to publish something in a journal or in a book 25 years ago. Today, you can go viral, can't you? And who can go viral today? Anyone, anytime. We could create something right now with this camera, and if it was good enough, we could put it on YouTube and go viral. I've actually been viral because a few years ago, I decided to take, it's a true story, another teacher and I, in our yearbook, took our picture with, like, we decided to be funny, and so he looked up when they took our yearbook photos, you know how they do that, and I looked down, so that we knew where we were in the alphabet, so that we're actually looking at each other. And now if you Google funny yearbook photos, it was on like the first page of Reddit, and then Yahoo picked it up, and this photo. And my students today still are like, they just told me last week, they said, "Oh, we saw you on YouTube, your photo. It's still going around." And I'm like, who knew? Because one of my students took a photo, like a screenshot of, or you took a photo of the photo in the yearbook, put it on, I think, Reddit or HuffPost or one of those, and it was like on the first page and went viral. So, and I'm like, oh goodness, I wish we never did that. I get emails from former friends from like high school back in Michigan, who are like, "Did you know that you're on HuffPost?" And then they send me the link, and I'm like, yes, that will not stop going around. My point is this: anybody can do that, right? We are now producers of media. And if you have a Twitter account or a Snapchat, or you have Instagram or whatever, Facebook, you can publish, you can get your voice out there. We don't just consume media, we publish it. I mean, I don't think anybody who wants their news today waits till the 5 o'clock news on Channel 7, do they? If you want to know what's going on in the world, where do you look? You go to Twitter. You go online and you find out, you know, we now have people producing the news, and so nobody waits till the nightly news to watch what's going on. It's happening in real time, and so we have access to media. So we've talked a lot about access. I don't need to talk any more about that. Let me talk a minute about alienation. They describe in the book alienation as very high levels of isolation from family, community, and institutions. And one of the defining features of the millennial generation, they say, is relational alienation. And by that I mean we are more connected than ever before. Teens today are so connected. They're texting each other. They're in, they send each other their Snapchats, Instagram photos. They are so connected, and yet they are so alone at the very same time. That they are seeing, psychologists and sociologists are saying that today's teens, though they are connected through media and digital media, are extremely relationally alienated. Have you ever seen this? A group of teenagers, and this is the scene. They're all together, but they're all what? They're all alone. And this, they would say, is hanging out. This is how they hang out. Some of them in this circle are probably even texting each other. They say it's very common in a group like this to be texting. So girl in the red, halter top might be texting the girl next to her saying that the girl behind her, doesn't she look fat? And so they're gossiping about each other, they're texting each other, they're sharing, whatever, and so they are together. We were over at the Habit. Do you guys have the Habit out here? Burger place. We were at the Habit. I don't know, about a year ago, and my wife and kids and I noticed outside there was a group of APU students who were all having dinner together at the Habit. And there was about 5 of them sitting around a table, all eating, and all 5 were on their phone. And if you had asked them afterwards who they had dinner with, they probably would have said, well, yeah, I hung out with my friends. They didn't say a word the entire time. So they were alone together, and they were alienated, and they were, even though they were together and sitting together, they call that relational alienation. This generation is skeptical and even cynical about the institutions that have shaped our society. They have a high level of cynicism when it comes to the institutions. And unfortunately, the church is part of that, aren't we? They see the church as an institution, and many of this generation are skeptical of the church or cynical about the church, and that's why they say about 60% are leaving the church, because they feel disconnected and alienated from these old institutions. And then when it comes to the final one, I think it was authority. Right? Oh, here's another photo. Isn't that a great one? When it comes to alienation, here's this guy. He's, on his phone as a humpback whale is breaching right next to his boat. And this was actually in the LA Times, I think, a few years ago, off the shore here. Actually missed the whale because he was alone on his phone doing something and missed beauty. Authority. They say the spiritual narrative of our culture has shifted slowly in places and quickly in others towards secularism and away from the Bible and Christianity. And they're finding that when it comes to authority, millennials are increasingly becoming more secular, and they are not finding their authority in the Word of God, and definitely not in the church. And they're saying that that's not where they're looking to. Millennials are friends with a more religiously diverse network of peers than any other generation. Because they are so connected online and so connected with the world, they are religiously diverse, and so it's not uncommon for them to say, yes, I have, friends who share all these different beliefs, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just another thing that's influencing them. And they're saying, well, I have my friend over here is Muslim, and then I have a friend here who's agnostic and atheist, and I have a Jewish friend, and I have this and that, and it kind of all works for them. They're among, according to Barna's research, millennials are among the least likely to name the Bible as sacred scripture. They're more likely to consult the internet than their pastor about religious questions. So if they have religious questions, they're not necessarily going to talk to people like me. They're going to go where? We're going to Google it or ask Siri, right? and what kind of answers will Siri give you? Or will Google give you? It's like anybody knows, whatever you're putting in. And so when that comes back to information and where they're getting their information, is they're more likely not to come to somebody they see as a spiritual authority, but they would say, well, I can just go online and find the answer to that. And which it says they're tech savvy, but not necessarily truth savvy. And there is a common claim for where they got their information is, I found it online. And everybody has an opinion, but it's hard to know who to trust. So, because this is a generation where everybody's opinion matters, and everybody should care about my opinion, and so it's hard to know who to trust. And we see this even in the news today with this whole fake news thing that's everybody's talking about. It's who do we trust? And so millennials are increasingly saying, well, it's not people like me. Well, this may seem like a daunting reality, and in some ways it is. You kind of look at this generation, you say, wow, this is really scary. And this is, the fact that so many are leaving the church and are abandoning their faith. I see that every year with the students that I teach. They go to high school. I see some of them return, and I can usually tell within a few minutes those that have kind of maintained their faith and those that are staying strong and those who have kind of walked away, and those are the sad cases. But I see it also as an amazing opportunity for those of us who teach young people. And I want to just kind of spend the remainder of our time talking about that opportunity. How do we transform? How do we teach them to be transformers of culture, not just absorbers of culture? And I want to start just with a verse I'm sure you're familiar with in Romans 12, where Paul writes, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." And I don't know about you, but that's what we want from our children, isn't it? That's what we want. We want them, that they would, we want to see transformation, that they would be, as the verse says, living out God's will for their life. His good, we know his will is good. We know it's what will please him. We know it's perfect. That's what we want for our teenagers. And we know what Paul says, that they would live lives transformed by the gospel. But to do that, it's going to require sacrifice, won't it? I mean, that's what it says in to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. It's going to require all of us. It's going to require us to including our media and digital media. That's what it's going to require of them. And it's how do we lead them? How do we teach them not to conform to this world, but to actually be to be transformed by God's word, and then to be a transformer of culture. And so let me just turn a corner and talk about how do we use these three daunting realities of access, alienation, and authority, and how those might, I believe those open up some amazing new venues for the gospel and some opportunities. And let me start with access, because I believe that access, it's not all negative. None of this is like, well, that's bad, this is good. It's not negative. We're actually seeing digital media opening up some, like I said, some amazing new venues for the gospel, because teens want to share. They want to share their lives. We know that because they're sharing, what they ate for breakfast on Snapchat, and they think everybody cares. What they had for breakfast. So we see in our teens today, they have this innate desire to have an opinion, to share something, and to have a voice, and to be a producer of media. I think we can leverage that for the gospel. I really do. They want to make a difference for things that really have meaning in their lives. That's what they're saying about this generation. They want to make a difference. They get energized around causes. I don't know if you've noticed that about this generation, but there are certain causes that they get very passionate and very energized about. I think we can leverage that as well. I think this is an important point. Millennials expect to participate, not just consume, which I think is very key. If all they ever do is just listen to us, give them information, and they don't actually get to put it into practice, they will grow rather bored rather quickly. Have you noticed that? Like, if our lessons are just information, but there's no, like, connecting it to their digital world, it's like they grow deaf to that so quick. They just tune that out so quickly. And so they want to participate. From time to time in my class, I will do a lesson where I take a concept that we've been studying, whatever it is in Bible class at that time, and I will spend time and I will go out and find some media, some type of digital media, whether it's a song, whether it's a clip from Stranger Things. Do you guys know Stranger Things? Big Netflix show about these children that they all binge watched about 4 months ago. Find a clip from that show, find a music video, a recent movie clip or something, and I'll take whatever we've been talking about, and I will show them that. And they come alive. It's like as soon as I play a clip of that song that was on Kiss FM that they listened to on the way to school, and then I play it in my class and I say, well, let's talk about, in light of our Bible lesson this week, let's talk about that song. Let's, what are the chains? So we did a lesson about the chain smokers. I don't know if you've heard the chain smokers, but they have some songs with some interesting concepts and ideas about relationships. And so, I mean, all of a sudden, these kids who were like bored stiff and I couldn't get to raise their hand all had their hands in the air with an opinion and passionately defending why it's the best song ever or the worst song ever. And I try to pick things that are really appropriate, of course, that we can talk about in that context, but also that I know they have an opinion about. And there are certain cultural figures that are like, that you just know, are like lightning rods. Like they are going to want to talk about that. And so I've done that with my 8th graders, especially this year, on about 5 occasions. And those 5 lessons, and it doesn't take a whole lot of work from me. They just come alive. And I let, what was another one we did? There was another group, 21, what is their name? Thank you. There's a millennial. The 21 Pilots. They had a song. I didn't know anything about the 21 Pilots. I come to find out these were 2 guys from Ohio, I think, both who grew up in youth group together. Both who grew up in the church together. I think one of them might have been a pastor's kid. I can't remember if I read his bio right. Both abandoned their faith and are extremely popular right now. I think they won a Grammy for Best New Artist. And they had a song, and I played the song with the lyrics up on the screen. And my kids, they just came alive when we did that. So they wanted to participate. And but we still talked about the Bible, but I brought in that, and it really helped that conversation. Here's another quote from You Lost Me. He writes, despite years of church-based experience and countless hours of Bible-centered teaching, millions of next-generation Christians have no idea that their faith connects to their life's work. They have access to information, ideas, and people around the world, but not clear vision for a life of meaning that makes sense of all that input. I believe one of the things we have to do for students is to show them the bigger picture. And by that, how their life can connect with what God is doing in the world, and how their life can become a part of the big story of what God is doing. It is, I believe, it's the church's call. As a Christian school, it's our call to cultivate what I call a larger, grander, more compelling and historic sense of our purpose, not only as a body, the church, but as individuals as well. And to teach our children that being a Christian, following Jesus, it means finding a vocation, a calling, that he wants to use you for your entire life. It's not about just going to heaven when you die. It's about living today and making a difference in the world, in your school, in your family. And so let me say something more about alienation. I think when it comes to alienation, we have some amazing opportunities as well for transformation, because the church by nature, we are called to be a community, right? A family. And so for all of these teens who feel isolated and alienated and alone, even though they are connected, I think we can become the true, authentic, real flesh and blood community that what we do is we replace loneliness with love. And as teachers, I think that's one of your primary jobs, is that you are just a person who loves them unconditionally. Because so many of our teenagers maybe come from a home where their love is conditional, or who are at school with their friends and their love is conditional. And so what we do on a daily basis, or whenever you get to teach them, is we just model that unconditional love. And we are present in their lives. And we make real investments in who they are. We ask questions. They want to, sometimes we think they don't want to talk. They don't want to talk to me, I'm old, But when you start asking questions about their music, or I start asking questions about Stranger Things on Netflix, which I don't care about, let's be honest. I could care less about that. I'm never going to watch it, probably. But I start asking them questions, and I kind of get into that world, and I think that's one of the ways we can show that we do care. I believe the Christian community should be a place of flourishing intergenerational relationships. And what I mean by that is they need they don't just need to be with each other. They need the influence of the older generations. And so I think that's where they really flourish, is that what we can provide is that wisdom for them and to be available. Because deep relationships, I think, only happen when we spend time. And so it's saying, I'm going to make an investment of time in these teenagers, whether it's for a month or a year or whatever, because time equals love in their minds. And to allow them to challenge us, and to allow them to learn from them, and not just to teach them, but to also learn from them. When it comes to authority, I think there are also some silver linings. It can be great opportunities. I think, let me see if there's okay, I'll get to that in a second. I got some ideas for you, some things that I use to help to teach in a minute. Another quote from the book, it says, "A culture of skepticism is a culture of questions, and questions can lead to conversations, relationships, and truth." And so if they are going to be a generation that is skeptical and that asks questions, I think that's great. And that gives us an awesome opportunity to listen to their questions and to give honest answers and to have discussions that we should embrace, and not to be afraid of doubt, not to be afraid of their questions, but to be willing to listen and to handle those head on. And I have found with my students, it's okay sometimes, even as a person of authority, when I say, you know what, I don't know. That's a really hard question, and there's not an easy answer to that. There doesn't mean there aren't answers, but hang around and let's talk about that together, and let's study that together, because that was a great question. And then they feel awesome that they've just asked a really good question, and they're not just trying to stump you. And I've found sometimes we feel like we have to have all the answers, I think. They ask us something, and even if it's about some current, and a lot of them come down to we've had some really current, some of the political conversations of the last year, or some of the hot button social topics that they ask about, and to say, you know what, that's really complex. And that's a tough question, but let's study it together. And then they feel like now they're excited about that. Well, let me give you just some practical resources that I use to teach in my classroom. And as I teach primarily junior high, but I think this could work with high school as well. Are you familiar with the Bible Project? Yes? No? Maybe so? If you're not familiar with the Bible Project, I highly encourage it. It is, how do I explain this really short? It's a YouTube channel. It's on YouTube. They also have a website, thebibleproject.com. This, two guys, one is an illustrator, an animator, and one is a professor of Bible up in Portland, Oregon. They have illustrated and drawn out in real time, you can watch them doing this, every book of the Bible, Genesis to Revelation. I use this every time we study a book, and my students love it. The junior high kids love it because they see it drawn out in front of them, and it's artsy and it's animated, and it's. I should have brought a clip to play for you today. They've literally, and not just books of the Bible, but themes, all sorts of things. I think they're at 132 videos right now. It's a nonprofit organization. They're doing some amazing work, and I use it. And all the videos, here's the great thing, they're like 5 minutes. Each one's about 5 minutes long, so it's not like you're into like a 30-minute video. They're 5-minute summary snapshots. It's called The Bible Project. I highly encourage it. It's excellent material for teaching teenagers. Axis, anybody familiar with Axis? Luminita probably, because our school uses. Axis is a wonderful organization to get plugged into when teaching teenagers. It's axis.org is their website. They're out of Colorado Springs, and their focus is cultural engagement for Christian youth. And they have amazing resources, and you can, some of it you have to buy, and as a church, I would highly recommend investing in it. One of their free resources, though, is called the Culture Translator. It is free. You can sign up on their website, and what they basically do is every Friday, Access sends you on your phone or email 3 things that are happening in the culture in a Christian response. 3 things that happened this week. So, for instance, let me give you an example, because I just got my email last night. They always come on Friday, and then for $5 a month, you can buy the next level, which is like 12 different stories linked to articles and research and all kinds of stuff, and engaging teenagers. So the one that just came yesterday, here are the 3 stories. It's called, here it is. Number one was on ESPN, the layoffs at ESPN. I don't know if you were familiar with that. So they have this whole thing about media and ESPN, sports, and all those. I haven't read this one yet. Um, Lord of the Fry Festival. Anybody even heard of this? I guess happened. I know, I have too. It's a music weekend on a private island in the Bahamas. Fry was canceled today due to disorganization and mass chaos. Did you hear that on the news? See, I saw it on Facebook, but I didn't click on it. I didn't have time to read about it because it's too much information. So this synthesized, and then number 3, it was called Write Your Teen a Note. And it says, in a conversation this week with our friend, author, speaker, Dr. Kathy Koch, she blew us away with a way to blew us away with a practical tip to connect with your teen. And then there's a whole article about that called "Write Your Teen a Note." And so those are just the 3 things. Oh, and then they give you the top 10 music things on music, if you're interested, because I'm not listening to what they're listening to. So it gives me the top 10 list, what they're listening to, and a lot of times it'll tell you what the song is actually about. Number 1 right now is "I'm the One" by DJ Khaled, featuring Justin Bieber, Chance the Rapper, and Quavo and Lil Wayne. I'm like, that's like 7 people. Anyway, so I highly recommend getting up. That's free. It's called The Culture Translator. It's at axis.org. A couple other things I use. Right Now Media is a paid base. You have to pay for this, but they have over 3,500 discipleship videos for kids, youth, and adults. This would be one that your whole church could invest in. Everybody in your youth ministry would get a login, and they have got amazing videos. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how many videos about, you name whatever you're teaching on, they probably have a video on that from incredible speakers. We just finished, I think, with 7th grade with Sam's class. We did a whole series with Tim Tebow. I don't know if you're familiar with Tim Tebow. He has 5 talks. They're each like 10 minutes long and are just really good talks that the kids really connected with. Tim Tebow, former like Heisman Trophy winner, NFL player. I guess he's now trying to play baseball. So they had talks with guys like Francis Chan, all different types of Christian speakers are on Right Now Media. So I use Right Now Media a lot in my class. Flannel is another organization. It's flannel.org, and they are creating some amazing content as well. I use them. They have a series called Basic by Francis Chan, which is just like kind of the basics of Christianity, and these short films is really what they are. They're like 10-minute long films. Each of these could be used easily in a Sunday school class or a youth group meeting, and I use those a lot in my class. There's another one called Ed's Story, which is a man who was dying of MS, and it's his story, not MS, Lou Gehrig's disease. Is that the same thing? ALS, thank you. I knew it was the one everybody was pouring ice on each other a year ago for. That one, right. But it's his story. He recorded 7 videos before he died. He was a former pastor of a very large church in Michigan, and it's incredible material just about why bad things happen. Because I think a lot of teens struggle with that. Why do bad things happen in the world? Well, he talks about that because he's like, I have ALS, and I know I'm going to die. And my kids really connected with him and his story. And he was given, 2 years to live, and I think he lived 12. So it's really an inspirational story as well. That's through flannel.org. You can get all those and download them online. They cost like $1.99, or you can buy the whole series for like $10. And then you have them forever. So Glow Bible is it's an app that I use in my class. And you can put it on your phone. Any of you have Glow Bible on your phones or on your tablet? It can go on your phone, your tablet. It's the Bible app that I use. And I like Glow Bible. I wish they had they used to have the NIV and other versions of the Bible, and I think because of licensing, that all got taken away. I don't know. So now they only have the ESV version. I don't know what version your church uses. But Glow Bible, it's the ESV version, and if you upgrade to I think it's for like $5.99 or maybe it's $10.99. You get access to so many amazing Bible resources, from videos to maps to photos to digital tours. I use this in my Bible class, and so we study using this app every day, and the kids can click on things. And I know probably all your kids aren't going to have tablets in your Sunday school, but you could certainly have it on an iPad or something and show them stuff, which could be a really cool resource. Fuller Youth Institute, right down the road. I would highly recommend getting connected with the Fuller Youth Institute. It's run by a friend of ours named Dr. Kara Powell, and she's at Lake Avenue Church and also at Fuller. The Fuller Youth Institute, they are doing some amazing work, and they have some amazing resources. Their goal, it says, is equipping teens with lifelong faith they'll need. They have everything from trainings to justice, urban youth, Sticky Faith. I don't know if any of you read Sticky Faith. Kara wrote that. This is one of their latest books for parents. It's called Right Click, Parenting Your Teenager in a Digital Media World. And so this is be a great resource, probably not for some of you younger people, but for some of the parents. It's by Kara and a few others, called Right Click, and they're located just 10 miles that way in Pasadena. The Fuller Youth Institute. I use a lot of their resources in my classes, and you can check them out online as well. And then I know we're about out of time, aren't we? But I'll just give a few more. I've talking about participation, I've connected a lot of my students with the Union Rescue Mission right here in Los Angeles as a way to practice what they've been learning, and especially when it comes to issues of justice and caring for the poor. And so for years, I've been doing that. Sam went on a trip with us. We just went up to San Francisco and worked with YWAM. I think I have them on here. Or the Dream Center. We've worked with the Dream Center in Los Angeles, or Youth with a Mission. We've worked with different organizations. And why I promote those is this is an opportunity for our teenagers to actually get out of the church building or the classroom and actually go put their faith into practice, which that's when it becomes real. And so I've made it intentional every year to do at least 2 or 3 or 4 of these opportunities for our teenagers to actually get out and live out their faith. And I think it's more likely if they're living it out in practice, then it begins to transform them. And they begin to see the things that we've been talking about in class. I'm actually living these out here on the streets and in my neighborhood or in my city. And that's when I've seen real transformation. And that's when I've seen it stick with our teens, those who get involved in those types. So just giving them opportunities like that. I think I've gone over time because you were supposed to go to 11:30, right? That's fine. Is that a cultural thing? I don't know. Okay. Okay. When I taught at Armenian school, it was always like, yeah, school started around 8. Or a meeting would start, teacher's meeting at 3:30, but we'd start at 4. So everything was right. Okay. Yeah. Everybody got there at the same time. Right. Well, like I said, it is a brave new world, and yeah, relationships, so key. I was once, I remember in university, someone saying to me, "Your kids will never care how much you know until they know how much you care." So, until they know that you care about them, they don't care what you know. And you can give them all the information and nothing's going to stick. But when they know you care and you show up at their basketball game, after school, and you're like there in the stands watching and cheering them on, like, "Oh, wow, you care. Now I'm going to listen to you at, in Sunday school because you showed up and you were present for me." And you don't have to do stuff like that. You texted me. "How was your day?" Something small, and it shows that you care. So, well, unless there's any questions, I'll kind of wrap up. I'd love to pray for you guys, and I hope some of this has been helpful. I hope it's given you maybe an understanding of the teens. I mean, a very brief. I would totally recommend reading "You Lost Me" by David Kinnaman for some of the research, and yeah, you guys are doing amazing work, I'm sure, and keep it up. Sure. Do I know? There's no way I could keep up with it all. That's why I think the Culture Translator, like Axis, that's such a great resource because they send me this stuff, and so I think my kids probably think I'm more in the loop than I am. because I've read, this. I'll read about these people. Like they sent me the top 10, music things. So and I can reference that in class, and they're like, "Man, Mr. Gaines is like cutting edge. Like he knows DJ Khalid. I have no idea who that is. I know Justin Bieber. That's the only name on that list I think I knew. Um, but they're like, "Wow, you know that song?" Or when I played the Chainsmokers song, they were like, "Wow, you listen to the Chainsmokers?" I'm like, "No, that's not the point." Um, I said, "The point is, I know that all of you are, and they're giving you messages. You're receiving some messages from them. Let's talk about what those messages are." But I can't, I don't listen to all of that, and some of it I wouldn't even want to because it's just you start watching it and you're like, "Okay, I'm gonna click away from that." And then you go to them, you're like, "You mean you're watching this?" It's like, "Oh my goodness." Um, yeah, the garbage in, garbage out thing. But they are. And you know, we had an issue. I had a parent come to talk to me about their student was watching this show. It's a new Netflix show. It's about a girl. What's it called? Yes. Yes. That's right. Absolutely. Yes, and but all these girls who were 13, they were watching this show on Netflix called 13 Reasons. And so I had parents texting me like, "Do you know about this show?" I'm like, "I know nothing about this." So I went and did a little research, and I found out the same thing. It's about 13 reasons. Right. Mhm. Right. So, yeah, and to know just to know what's in their head and then to be able to address some of that. Yeah, issues of I mean, these are big issues. A girl committing suicide, it talks about rape. I believe she's raped in the video or in the show, and which is one of the reasons why she commits suicide. And they say, "Oh, it's so compelling! Like it is such an amazing story." But and these are 12 and 13-year-olds who are binge watching this, um, 10 episodes at a time. So yeah, I think it would be. I think it's on Netflix, so it's probably just they usually just put like TVM for mature. It's not M. I don't know what it is. Yeah, the content is definitely mature, even if it's not graphic or overly sexual. But yeah, you're right. So you have to guard your. If they ask my opinion, I will tell them my opinion. Like I will say something like, "Well, I don't watch that." Like I remember a few years ago, they were all into like these slasher movies. It's like around Halloween time. You know, Scream or Saw or all these bloody stuff, and they're like, "Oh, we're all gonna go see it." Or we all saw it over the weekend. Did you see it, Mr. Gaines? I'll be like, "No," and I'll give them my opinion. And I'm like, I'll say, "Your parent let your parents bought you a ticket because isn't it like rated R? Like you had to actually have an adult buy you a ticket to go in there." "Oh yeah, I saw it with my dad." Um, so then I'll act kind of surprised, and then if they ask me like, "Are you going to see it?" I'll tell them why I'm not, and I'll give them my opinion, and it's usually a pretty strong opinion as to why I don't watch those kind of movies and why I would never take my child to see that, and then I just let my opinion kind of stand. Yeah. Mhm. Right. Right. Yeah, you can come across some pretty scary stuff. Um, yeah, if you knew the parent, if you have a relationship with, I mean, it's one thing because some parents would be like, "Well, don't tell me how to raise my child," like, and then they just get really defensive. But if you have a good relationship with the parent, I would certainly go to them and say, "Hey, do you know what's on that show?" Because if you don't know, because most parents aren't watching it with their kid, they're not watching 13 Reasons with their 13-year-old. Yeah, they're watching it in their bedroom, which is so scary. They have, yeah, That's true. That is a touchy situation. Which I think why relationships are so important, that you can say, you know what, it's because I love you and I care about you and I don't want you to be harmed, and I know that you're young and your mind is absorbing these ideas and images, and yeah, hopefully they would know that you care and they would not just shut you out of their life, but they might. But they would shut you out knowing that you cared. Any other ideas or thoughts? Or I think some of those resources, I can give you the list of stuff that I put up there. I think are some great stuff that really get you connected with. Yeah, and most of it, a lot of it's